So I'm here to talk about boring, staid, old things like MTN, which is effectively a utility company, but is probably one of the most important underlying foundation backbones for digital innovation across our economy, which we hope to be $1 trillion economy in due course. So starting off with the first slide, actually the pointer is here. We are in Africa's largest economy. Devaluation might have hit us in that perspective. And we're definitely in Africa's most populous country, and we're undergoing a significant digital transformation. And with our population, the potential is immense. The telecommunications sector has been a critical driver of economic growth in this country. And you'll see through some of my slides, we actually account for effectively somewhere around 14% of GDP. So MTN on its own is around 7% of Nigeria's GDP. I'll be highlighting and talking about the telco to TechCo migration of MTN and the telecommunications industry in Nigeria. Our history goes way back. Sometimes we look to the past to understand how much things are going to change in the future. Back in 1992, the NCC decree allowed the regulation of telecommunications in Nigeria, and this really was the founding milestone for the transformation of our industry. In 98, the initial set of private operators were licensed. The big transformation revolution came in 2001, 2002, when the likes of MTN, what today is Airtel, MTEL, were licensed to become GSM operators, and then subsequently Glo was licensed as another GSM operator, and also defined as the second national carrier. We all know the story around per second billing, so I won't go into that. Somewhere in 2007, 2008, 3G was launched. I think we didn't know much what to do with it until the BlackBerry came around. Subsequently, the iPhone and other smartphones accelerated the use of data on mobile networks. In 2010, the first national broadband plan was commissioned to drive broadband penetration, and I think that's been quite successful, as much due to the private sector as anything else. And somewhere in the 2020s, we participated in the launch for 5G spectrum auction, successful in launching 5G in 2022. Now, telcos are facing a massive challenge. Historically, voice used to account for 90% of our revenue. For MTN, that's now below 50%. And voice was where the margins were. There actually isn't much profitability in the data business, which accounts for half of our revenue at this point in time. And this has been one of the drivers of the changing landscape that we experience in Nigeria and across the globe for the telecoms industry. The first one is customers are now demanding increasingly digital services, mobile banking, e-commerce, gaming, streaming, etc. And telcos, because they have been compressed in terms of their earnings, their revenues, their profitability, have had to look for new streams of revenue and had to participate in the future opportunity that's offered by these services. The second is really the digital transformation of all of the countries that we're in. And I'll use the banking industry as a particularly clear sector. Nice to see Bode there, one of the innovators that has transformed the banking services while she was in Flutterwave. So banking, we used to walk into a bank, we used to drop a check, it would take 5 days to clear, or 3 days, whatever the situation might be. We had to collect cash to make every single payment, even down to tickets. And we can see how, enabled by the telecommunications services industry, how that has radically transformed. I often say I was in Stanford for a 6-week program in the month of July, early August. And I often say that the financial services industry in Nigeria, at least in the Western Hemisphere, is probably more developed than most countries in the world. In the USA, if you want to transfer from bank to bank, traditional banks to traditional banks, they still go through clearing. And so it still takes, in the USA today, it still takes 3 to 4 days for your funds to move and show on the other side. Which goes to, Frederick, did I get your name right? Yeah. Frederick's point that the West actually is no longer innovating. And they've lost the edge in terms of innovation, and they're still asleep, probably because they named themselves developed countries. So I listen, Fred. Increasing competition is hitting us. If you move around the world today, you'll find a lot of opportunities to use hotspots for free. People are creating virtual SIMs, getting number series and using that to register things like OTTs. the reality is that we are selling data effectively almost at a loss, but most of the value that's created through the enablement of data networks is actually taken by the OTTs, who use the information garnered through people's Facebook, Instagram, etc., to create very effective marketing business cases for all sorts of business, SMEs, etc. So what has all of this done? It's transformed us, it's shrunk our margins, and we have no choice but to innovate. And let me be clear, we have not yet innovated in the telecoms industry. We have a long way to go. So we must focus on innovation to drive our future performance and returns to shareholders. And how is that innovation going to be? I think we have a key role to play in financial inclusion, particularly at the bottom of the pyramid. We have, of course, we are the backbone of infrastructure for IoT. IoT is going to explode. There are massive opportunities in agriculture, health, and of course, fintech as a whole is continues to be a very, very interesting space for us to play in. In MTN Nigeria, we are transitioning from a telco, telecommunications company, to a TechCo, technology company. But this is quite a journey. There's nothing, they say, I think I've heard once that the worst addictions in the world are heroin, nicotine, carbohydrates, and the monthly salary. So once you're working and you're getting a monthly salary, to actually quit your job, start up your own company, is as difficult as quitting all the other addictions. And I think that's also the problem that is facing companies like MTN Nigeria today, is we're addicted to our current revenue streams. And for us to really innovate, we must almost destroy those revenue streams to transform the DNAs of the organization that we live in. The organization that I lead is actually designed to protect the revenue streams that we have. So transforming from a telco to a TechCo is a mammoth task for us. We have the financial resources, but do we have the kind of DNA in the company to innovate and take risks that could put the entire company on the line? Nonetheless, there's huge opportunities. 5G, we were the first to launch 5G in 2022, and that's going to revolutionize connectivity. We started now in the urban centers. We're using our 5G solutions to provide fixed broadband solutions for businesses, small enterprises, homes, etc. But it's going to revolutionize in many ways. One, the cost of delivery of data on 5G is cheaper than the cost of delivery of data on 4G. Two, the low latency and high speeds offers opportunities in the space of Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So it's going to open up multiple new business models, including in the health sector because of the low latency where we can capture. Our mobile money offering, primarily focused on the bottom of the pyramid today, is at the front of our transition from a telecommunications company to a TechCo. And I think if we can meet the demands and create new business cases, sometimes business cases and use cases that the customers themselves don't realize that they need today, I think that's a huge opportunity. We've commissioned and started, we're probably 70% of the way towards building the largest data center in West Africa. And I think that's going to enable us to provide, again, the infrastructure for the services, storage, for a lot of business cases, particularly as the adoption of artificial intelligence accelerates across our markets. So we're diversifying our offerings through a multitude of solutions. My MTN app, that's really about customer service, moving people away from coming into our shops and falling our data centers towards self-service. Ayoba is MTN's super app that combines messaging, social networking, entertainment, content, etc. in one platform. Our MTN Play is focused on entertainment, music, games, video streaming, and digital content in general. Amomo PSB has spoken to, and then we have an API marketplace that we call Chenosis for people that want to connect to a variety of services to really grow their businesses. So how are we doing this transformation? First of all, if you really want to transform yourselves in this digital space, there are some core competencies which you need. So we have developed an in-house engineering team with specialized experts to design and manage cutting-edge infrastructure and solutions. We're transforming customer experience. We still have a way to go. We're not there yet. By digitizing and personalizing our customer experience and our customer experience touchpoints, we launched the first completely digital customer service center on Adeola Odeku. So you effectively do not need to interact with a human. We launched that a few months ago. We are expanding our portfolio to include diverse business solutions. We are driving economic inclusion through our financial solutions through Momo. And we are fostering digital innovation by supporting the ecosystem of startups, SMEs, and technology innovators. So that's what MTN is doing. Very boring compared to Frederick's presentation. Just some other points around the potential economic impact of our telco to techco transition. You will see in the chart there that the contribution of the telecommunications sector to the GDP of Nigeria has grown from about 7%. It has effectively doubled between 2012 and now in the last 12 years. And perhaps outside of the oil industry, I think this is the most impactful driver of our economic growth, in Naira at least, be as it may. We probably have the highest impact in employment, direct and indirect employment. We employ in Nigeria, indirectly and directly, over 3 million people. Now, why is telco so significant? It's because telco has an economic impact in every local government, practically every town and village in Nigeria. There are many other sectors where the economic impact is limited to a specific geographical area other than sales. But because we put up base stations, masts that have to be maintained, supplied with diesel, airtime distribution, etc., we really have an impact across the country. The potential of the future and how we can be a part of the transition to a $1 trillion economy. Food and agriculture, the transformation could add 3.3 trillion naira to the sector if executed well. In terms of manufacturing, automation of factories, tracking of goods, etc., there's a potential to increase the people in employment by 465,000 new jobs and increase the sector's value by 5 trillion naira. Healthcare, I think the direct impact might appear a little bit more muted, $700 million by 2030. But the consequent impact on improved healthcare, productivity of the population, lifespan, etc., can be measured in many other forms. And I think, very, very importantly, the curriculum that is being taught in schools and universities today, first of all, is behind what the rest of the world is learning. And how do we catch up in terms of the curriculum and get the masses of people educated at a much faster pace with the relevant skills that we need for the future? I think the digital transformation of Nigeria and digital technologies can really accelerate that. And then transportation, I won't dwell on that extensively. I think I've spoken about the jobs impact. So for the economists in the room and the financial people in the room, even though we've had a massive impact on the economy, our sector is in somewhat of a difficult situation. Our domestic investment across the sector has actually shrunk in real terms. In 2021, the sector invested in capital expenditure 1.13 trillion naira. That has declined in 2023 to 991 billion naira, and that's due to the economic pressures. If you measure that in dollars, we are doing probably around 40% in terms of capital expenditure investment, what we did 3 years ago. I don't have to speak to the impact of the currency devaluation. Optically, our revenue appears to have increased by 63% in naira. But in reality, in US dollars, we've actually shrunk by about 24% across the sector. Foreign direct investment in telecoms has also shrunk. And the big problem that we are facing is the operating expenditure increases, where operating expenditure has increased by 84% over the last 2 years or so. And that's driven primarily by the devaluation. The difference between us and other sectors is we have not been able to increase prices on an ongoing basis. If you're buying whether a bottle of Coke, Nestle Life water, bread, whatever it is, a sack of rice, you can see the exponential increase in the cost of a sack of rice. I remember it wasn't too long ago, I bought a sack of rice for 8,000 naira. It's around 85,000 naira at my last assessment. So this is a big, huge potential risk to the stability and the long-term longevity of the telecommunications industry. Why is this important for all of us? This is a technology excellence conference. It's because this is the backbone on which the majority of services and innovations that we're considering as part of this conference that people are innovating on won't happen if you don't have this robust, resilient, and reliable telecommunications backbone. The challenges to our industry, regulatory and policy challenges, I have to say, and I'm not saying this just because they are my regulator. The Nigerian Communications Commission, I believe, is still one of the most professional regulatory bodies in Nigeria today. But everyone in every country is struggling with the rapid change of technology and how to regulate that. The most important and critical of those is the transition to artificial intelligence. So we need regulatory and policy changes that address issues such as data privacy, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and fair competition policies. In spite of the advancements in infrastructure and telecoms, there's still a significant urban-rural divide. And what has happened is that historically, I think we had a view of what Nigeria looked like from a demographic perspective, which was done probably at the last census. But the shape of Nigeria has changed. The people that we measured when the last census happened, I'm not sure when it was, I can't quite remember, 2006 or 2008, have become adults. Villages have transformed, people have migrated, the population has expanded. So we need to reassess how we measure digital penetration, particularly into rural areas, because the demographics that we used to measure them historically has changed. There's a shortage of skilled, readily skilled talent, but there isn't a shortage of talent in Nigeria, and there isn't a shortage of young people who are hungry to learn. And so, yes, we do have Japa syndrome. People are leaving, but for every person that's left, there's 20 more people, very smart people, very professional people, committed, hardworking, that want to transform their lives, that are really willing to learn at a much faster pace. And of course, investment into this economy with negative returns in dollar-based analysis is a challenge. So you will not attract foreign direct investments into this economy. We'll have to do it on our own. What are the opportunities for MTN to propel, there you go, for MTN to help propel the Nigerian economy into a $1 trillion economy? The digital economy in Nigeria is valued at 50 billion, but there's a massive potential in multiple areas to transform that. The apparent serviceable FTTX market, that's fiber to the home, building, whatever it might be, in Nigeria is valued at 1.8 trillion if you, on the assumption there are 4.1 million households in Nigeria that can afford this. Now, that assumption is what we design today, but what innovation sometimes really is really about expanding that market. If a household needs to spend, let me use just figuratively, 100,000 naira to have good quality, let's say 50 megabits per second fiber access to their homes today, and only 4.1 trillion people can afford that on a monthly basis. The role of the telecoms industry and other sectors that support is to figure out how we can make that fiber to the X more affordable, maybe bring it down to 30, 40,000 naira a month, and consequently expand the number of households in the addressable markets to maybe 15, 20, 30 million. So that's one part of our responsibility. Industry 4.0, which includes automation and artificial intelligence, offers huge potential. The global market is expected for generative AI is expected to go to 1.3 trillion by 2032. E-commerce and fintech, which is a space in which I think we're doing decently well. There's some players in the market, but there's still quite a way to go. Is a space where we can really use to drive the economy towards the 1 trillion benchmark. And you can see there the chart on e-payment transactions and how that has accelerated. And then rural connectivity. Now, you see the statistics here, which is about 71% of Nigerians lack regular access to mobile internet services. It's not that they don't have coverage, but can they afford to have a steady, continuous connectivity to the internet? Most people in the low-income brackets buy maybe 100 megabits per day, and that's all they can afford to. So it's not about the infrastructure not being there, it's about the affordability that we're talking about. So, consequently, to summarize, what does our telco to techco transformation mean? It presents a massive opportunity for Nigeria, and by embracing digital transformation, investing in infrastructure, fostering innovation, and creating a sustainable industry for telecoms, which is the foundation for almost all digital innovation, there's a huge potential. I've mentioned healthcare, agriculture, e-commerce, manufacturing, etc., and artificial intelligence. All stakeholders, which means us in the room, international partners, the government of Nigeria and the operators in Nigeria must collaborate to make this a reality. One last thing I wanted to mention to Frederick's presentation. I think he said confidence is risky and curiosity is really what drives innovation. And I think the father of curiosity is humility. That's somewhat the opposite of confidence or maybe arrogance. As long as you're humble enough to realize that you haven't even touched the surface of what you should be touching, there's so much to learn, there's so many opportunities out there, I think we can develop that culture across Nigeria of curiosity, which, to be honest, already exists. I mean, we all know that our biggest potential is our innovative people, and we can all work together to this objective of $1 trillion economy. Thank you very much.